Welcome to this Policing TV recording. It's part two of a two-part recording with members of the Police Superintendents Association's National Executive Committee, and we're focusing on inclusion. I'm going to hand over here to the Vice President of the Police Superintendents Association, Harvi, Khatkar, to introduce her colleagues in turn and effectively to chair this second session. Harvi, over to you.
Thank you, Bernard, and thank you for this opportunity. I think before I go on to introducing each of my colleagues, I think it's really important to recognise that policing now is very different from probably when myself and my colleagues joined, and it may not be a career for 30 years for many of our staff that are joining. And we also, based on that, need to make sure that we adapt and make sure that we can cater for the needs of our changing workforce, both from a demographic perspective, but also in terms of the different needs that they have, and recognising that policing is a challenging role, but equally rewarding, that we also look after our staff in terms of both from a health and wellbeing perspective, but equally that we recruit and we try and retain staff, and that inclusion is so important in terms of culture that we are not in 10 years' time having another discussion about something like the Louise Casey report, and that we do see that visible difference. But equally, the aspiration would be that we don't have to put labels on people to say this particular group, that we absolutely understand the different needs of our staff, and that we are able to support them in each of their areas. So I'll now hand over to my colleague, and I will start off with Dave Oram, who is our race and inclusion representative. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that introduction, Harvi. I'd just like to speak just a little about the Police Superintendents Association and what it's done and is doing to improve inclusion across the service. So, I mean, hopefully it goes without saying that the Police Superintendents Association is really deeply committed to creating a police force that's representative of the communities that it serves. I mean, we're active participants in communities. We live in the communities that we police, and we all recognise that having a police force that represents communities is vitally important. So what you have to do is create an environment that ensures everybody, regardless of background, simply has an equal opportunity to excel and contribute meaningfully to keeping people safe and to bring their own lived experiences to policing. And of course, the job of policing, of course, is about keeping people safe, safeguarding our most vulnerable people, and bringing criminals to justice. I mean, we can't face away from that, and we need the most capable people to do that from all areas of society. We have to do it with key stakeholders. So, for instance, the College of Policing, who themselves have run a program called the Aspire program. I think it's really important that we support that as an association, and we're looking forward to do that in the future. It's really important that we work with the MPCC, with the Race Action Plan, and that we work with other organisations, because we're a staff association. We're an important staff association. We're part of the architecture of policing, but we've got to do it in collaboration with other partners in policing. So I think if we sustain the Future Suitors programme, we involve the communities more inclusively in that programme, we can break down barriers, create opportunities, and ensure that the leadership is diverse as it possibly can be. But I'd also like to see some of our political leaders from whatever party, from whatever background, speak in support of diversity and inclusion. And of course, there's going to be an election in 2024, and whatever party comes to power, I'd like us as an association to speak with ministers, ask for their support in inclusion and diversity, but not only in private, but also in public, so that we can all of our communities can see that policing and the public sector and at the government level are all committed to improving policing and inclusion going forward. And probably just finally, in our own association, the opportunity to develop a new strategy around EDI, that inclusion, diversity, and equality, diversity, and inclusion. Our own strategy is I hope we can refresh it, that we can pull together some of the strategic work streams that are already happening with partners, and that we can continue to work together to improve representation. And so thank you very much, Bernard, for the opportunity to just speak today on it, and I'm happy to take any questions as they might arise. Thank you.
Dave, thank you for that. I'll now hand over to my colleague Paul Burrows, who is the Disability Inclusion Representative.
Thank you, Harvi. What I'd like to do really is just build upon what David's been saying, but sort of signpost that in the disability world, I think what Harvi and I have been talking about is mirroring what Sara has been doing in the gender world, about having setting up some listening circles. As I mentioned in part one of this production or podcast, whatever we're calling it, we talked about the difficulty some people have in sort of coming out as having a disability or perhaps a neurodivergence. And what I want to do with Harvi through the listening circle is to actually give people the opportunity to raise any concerns they may have, any issues they may have, because I think it'd probably be fair to say that in the disability world, we're probably behind the other agendas that we're seeing represented in this call today. And to some extent, we can use the learning that's already taken place to play catch up. And so once we've done that, once we've given people the opportunity to tell us their lived experience, or indeed the experience of others, because as David implied, as senior police leaders, we can be perhaps hugely disproportionately impactful upon the cultures that take place within our own organisations and own departments. We can listen to that lived experience, then develop an action plan to look at what the association can do going forward to change this agenda. Personally, I'm working with Tracy, who's president of the Disabled Police Association, to make sure that we're joined up there. But for me, it's about finding out what the issues are for people first and foremost. So when we look forward, I would echo everything David said about talking nationally, locally, politically, seeking to influence. But for me, this is in the first instance is about our own members, so they can feel confident telling us who they are. We can learn from their lived experience and hearing about any barriers they may feel they face about coming out, if indeed they know that they have a disability or neurodivergent, and then develop an action plan which hopefully will impact the rest of the police service. And as I said in part one, this for me is encouraging the broader society, as David said, so we can reflect those people that we serve, and actually be those people that we serve, to actually make a police service that's fit for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I'll move over to Sara, who is our gender lead.
Thanks very much, Harvi. And again, just building on the previous comments, I wanted to talk about the listening circles that Harvi and I have undertaken over the past year with females in the superintending ranks in relation to violence against women and girls. And as part of those, we've gathered a number of themes that are still issues and barriers to women in policing. I think, though, the general view was that things relating to gender has improved, but there's still experiences of criticism, gender bias, discrimination and sexual harassment being reported. So really disappointing and frustrating that these scenarios are playing out today. There was a lot of good practice raised as well within the feedback from female superintendents and chief superintendents, and it gave a forum for that good practice to be shared. So that's one of the things that I'll be taking forward in terms of capturing that good practice and sharing it at that national level between forces. But sort of two areas I wanted to talk about that came out as broad themes within the feedback that we've had. And one is around representation in areas such as leadership roles, specialist roles, within operations and crime particularly. So role modelling was raised as being really important within those areas. And it's recognised that representation has increased. However, I think Dave mentioned earlier on, there are some gaps in the pipeline coming through in terms of women representation. So the work that we did was actually collate what we need to be doing moving forward. So part of that around representation was ensuring women are supported into those specialist roles. Some different areas to enable that would be ensuring clothing and equipment were female specific. Broader issues around support of whistleblowers who challenge poor behaviours in those type of roles were seen as a way forward to improve the representation. And it was about making opportunities for women to achieve leadership positions by breaking down those barriers. And part of that was to eliminate male bias and discrimination, and, for example, giving time to advantage to time serve and long hours cultures. And ultimately, it was around having flexibility within roles and rotas, which would attract more women and sort of broader diversity within those roles. And sort of linking to that theme of flexibility, that was another key area that my colleagues raised to me to highlight. And there certainly has been a real focus on flexible working, I think, across policing. COVID accelerated that for many forces. However, I think there's still a number of elements that the service must take into consideration to be able to take advantage of that and to enable women to go into more sort of diverse roles. And that's around building trust in the policies and practices that are actually in place, but reducing fear around postings and career progression, because that really is a barrier that many women feel they wouldn't be able to undertake a posting because of certain, inflexibility, therefore don't take it. I think it's important that we ensure roles are adjusted for part-time workers. There's a culture within policing that expects a part-time worker to undertake a full-time role. So it's around the flexibility and line management of those types of roles. And about challenging negative attitudes around flexible working, around all different line managers. But ultimately, I think my ambition would be to drive these issues through the PSA and to make sure we move to a culture where flexibility is seen as a positive, an opportunity, and that's for both males and females across the board. The way we're taking this forward is in terms of capturing those issues. We're already feeding them into national police chief council boards and meetings, and engaging with chiefs at those levels to make sure that policies and practices are taken into account these issues. And there's a lot of good work that is going on in individual forces, but it's actually about changing it from being an exception in a force to actually it's a rule across all the forces. And there's some standardized and consistent delivery of things like representation, support and flexible working across various different forces. So just to finish, I think it's really important that male colleagues support in terms of enabling gender or women's equality, and that's around promoting allyship not speaking for women, of course, but actually speaking out about gender equality and tackling Vogue issues, and supporting programs such as the He for She program or White Ribbon, where men, provide allyship for women's equality. So that's one of the things that I've been calling for as part of my role to represent women across the superintending ranks. I think I'll finish there. Thank you.
Sara, thank you for that. And I'll now hand over to Paul Court, who is our LGBTQ plus lead. Thank you.
Thanks, Harvey. I'll probably start with the general and bring it down to the specifics. So what do I see, or what do I think I need from the police service in the future? Well, I think the first starting point is honest conversations. And I would couple that with a professional curiosity of staff to actually be inquisitive around different people's difference, both locally within your teams, but more broadly around your knowledge of people's difference, different cultures, and different groups with protected characteristics. So I think there is a place in policing for honest conversations. I think that leads into people then having an awareness of what the key issues are facing the different communities that they police. And certainly the honest conversations, that pure professional curiosity, should lead to a police service in the future where awareness of the key issues in terms of the group that I face, in terms of the LGBT community, understanding the challenges they face. If we do that, then I think that we will end up with a police service which is compassionate and is understanding of the needs of those who we serve in the public. So I think that's the general, and I think that leads then hopefully to better representation, and particularly one of my pleas is that we have better representation within our national policing bodies in terms of that diversity and the makeup of them. If I take it right down to the specific as to what we need in the future based on what's happening right now today, then for those, many of you who have heard me speak before will know that I will at the moment continue to champion our trans colleagues and the issues that they face on a daily basis play out for those that we serve and also for those that are within our teams. And I regularly have these discussions with people around actually, well, what work is there to do? Well, hate crime is higher if you're trans, homicide rates are higher if you're trans, mental health and suicide rates are higher if you're trans, workplace discrimination is higher if you're trans. So right now, and what do we need to do in the immediate future of the police service? We need a police service that looks after trans colleagues and keeps them safe. What do we need more broadly? Well, we need honest conversations, professional curiosity, compassionate people, and hopefully that will make us better representative. Thanks very much, Harvi.
Paul, thank you for that, and thank you to all of my colleagues. I think, Bernard, what is really clear is that we continuously need to build on our cultural competence and awareness, and that will always come through continually listening to colleagues and communities, because that is the only way that we learn and develop and evolve. That is very important, and as an association we also need to evolve and make sure that we are representative both as a national office and as a committee, and through that understanding what different needs different individuals need, we will become that inclusive culture and representative service that we genuinely need to build that legitimacy and trust and confidence. So thank you.
So thank you very much, Harvi. Thank you very much also Paul, Sara and Dave, members of the National Executive Committee of the Police Superintendents Association in England and Wales. So thank you so much for that. Please listen out for part 1 as well if you've not yet heard it. I'm sure that you'll agree that there's plenty of food for thought in the comments that we've heard in this part 2. I wish you all well in the work that you do on inclusion and the ambition for delivering on what it is you've said. For the time being, though, thank you so much for spending time here at Policing TV.